Thank you so much to my patrons for voting for The Left Hand of Darkness to be the book that I revisit and reread in March. Every month I ask my patrons on patreon.com/WillowTalksBooks to vote on a book for me to reread the following month. This month, since I'm on a real sci-fi kick right now, they voted for this, and I am thrilled. I have a lot to say, and I actually asked for their help in the Discord as well while talking about this book, so without my patrons' help, this video would only be half as good as it is, and I'm not even sure how good it is yet, because I haven't made it. Here we go, let's find out. Published 55 years ago in 1969, The Left Hand of Darkness is a milestone in science fiction. An incredible work that stands shoulder to shoulder with all of the sci-fi greats. If you listed off 10 classic, influential works of science fiction literature, this would be on that list, and it would be near the top. This is one of the greatest works of science fiction of all time, by one of the great writers of fantasy and science fiction of all time. That is indisputable. And I read this book a good few years ago, back when I enjoyed science fiction, but I didn't think too deeply about the themes being explored. Rereading it in 2024, after coming out as trans, after being a lot more passionate about feminism and the roles of women, I saw this book through a very different lens this time around. When I first read it, I saw the way that this book played with the ideas of gender as clever and novel. I saw these ideas as interesting things to appreciate, maybe mull over, but that was kind of it. Now, revisiting this book several years later, I feel like I can finally fully appreciate what Le Guin was doing here and what makes this a masterpiece of science fiction. Now, in case you've never read it, The Left Hand of Darkness tells the story of an Earthling, or a Terran, named Genli I. Genli I is working as an envoy for a kind of galactic federation of planets. He is currently an envoy on a remote and cold planet called Gethen, and he's been there for 2 years. During that time, he's learned what's unique about the Gethen people compared to all the other humanoids that have been absorbed into this federation from across the galaxy over the past probably several hundred years. There's something that makes the people of Gethen entirely unique. And Genli is on this planet to try to convince these people by talking to their politicians, their leaders, to join this federation of planets. The thing that makes the people of Gethen unique is that they are what Le Guin calls ambisexual, or androgynous. They only have one gender. But because the world building of this book is so incredible, and I kind of underestimated it the first time I read it, the way that the people function, the way society functions, the way the biology works, it is all explained here. Put simply, everyone is one gender, and the concept of having 2 or more genders is disgusting and perverse to them, as I'll get into a little bit later. And the way that the people reproduce is that once a month, they basically go into heat. When a person goes into heat, and they have their own word for it, they can be, for lack of better words, masculine or feminine, and they can mate with someone who takes the opposite role. And that means they can father or carry a child. And many of the people that Genli meets during his time on Gethen have both fathered children and carried them. This has enormous ramifications across their culture and their history. The biggest being that there is no concept of war on this planet. The fact that there is no patriarchy means certain things, the most obvious being that there is no war. There are conflicts, there is murder, there is competition, there are crimes. It is not a perfect place. It is not Le Guin naively writing a feminist utopia, because they are not women either. Instead, this is a more complex society. It's more subtle than that. It is a world that lacks patriarchy and gender roles. One of the impacts of that is that war does not exist, and neither do concepts like sexual assault either. The people of Gethen talk openly about sex, about relationships, about mating and having children. None of it is taboo. But you do also learn that there are people in this world who basically choose to be in heat all of the time and assume a gender. And those people are freaks. They are called perverts. And Genli is seen as a pervert by some because he is a man. He is a masculine thing with masculine features and characteristics, and that to them is freakish and perverse. And I think that's fascinating. The way in which they judge him mirrors the way that he judges them, because Genli is not a very likable protagonist. He is very naive. He thinks these people are strange. And he definitely reflects 1960s attitudes towards gender roles. Le Guin is being wonderfully progressive in her exploration of gender roles and what an androgynous society would look like, the impact of that, the way that the society is structured, their history, their politics, their belief systems. It's all stirred up together with this androgynous society. But this is still a book of its time, written in the 60s. And Genli very much reflects that. And this is an interesting thing that I have been battling with since I started reading this book, and I'm still not sure where I land. I'm sure you understand this, I'm sure you've seen this in so much fiction. Where does the author end and the character begin? Because Genli is a pretty unlikable character. How much of that is Le Guin writing an unlikable male protagonist who has patriarchal and conservative attitudes towards sex and gender roles? And how much of it is Ursula Le Guin just reflecting the time in which she lived? It's kind of difficult to find that line, and I think that's a cool and interesting thing. And this is a good moment to talk about the thing that bugged me all the way through this novel. I didn't do any research about what Le Guin thought about the book after the fact, about the legacy of this book, especially in the mind of its author. But my patrons helped me out with that. You see, all the way through the book, the people of Gethin are genderless, but they need pronouns. And so Genli refers to all of them in the masculine. Everyone's a he, everyone's a him, and everyone's a man specifically. These men, those men, they're all men. But they're not men. They're not masculine. They're androgynous, they are genderless. And this was a massive failing for me of the novel. Calling everyone a man is masculinizing everyone. If everyone's a man, then everyone's masculine, then everyone has a masculine gender role, right? But no. This felt like a massive lack of imagination for Le Guin. The idea that she didn't think to use she for everyone to make a more feminist point, I guess. The fact that it didn't occur to her to use they, them. And I know that non-binary is at least seen as a very modern construct, so I'm not annoyed at her for not being a 21st century writer. That would be very stupid and naive of me. That's not what I'm doing. But I am surprised that she didn't come up with unique pronouns. The concept of neo-pronouns has existed since the 1800s, as one of my patrons pointed out when I talked to them about this on my Patreon Discord. Neo-pronouns are not neo. They've been around for a long, long time, decades before Le Guin wrote this, so why didn't it occur to her to use unique pronouns for these unique people? Why default to the masculine? Because that has enormous ramifications, as I've already said. In the eyes and the mind of the reader, we can't help but see all these people as a planet full of men. Even though over and over again, it's very important to establish that they are not men, and that is reflected in every aspect of their culture, politics, and history. So why use men? Why use he and him? Well, according to sources that were sent to me by my amazing patrons in our Discord, the book was criticised at its time for this very thing, for using he, him, and man as gender neutral, because of course they are not. And in fact, there's even a moment in the book where Genli says that he has chosen to use he, him, and man as gender neutral because they are at least more neutral than she, her, and woman, which of course is bullshit. And again, is this Genli saying this, or is it Le Guin saying it? The idea that he is more neutral than she is patriarchal. Genli argues that when you say she, certain expectations pop up into your mind, but he, less so. The idea that there are fewer stereotypes, that there are less expectations, fewer ideas that appear in your mind when you think of masculine things than if you think of feminine, is horseshit. Of course it is. It's an excuse to reinforce the masculine, the patriarchal, and I'm not here for it. But the book was criticised when it was published for this exact thing. Critics argued, why didn't you use gender-neutral language? Why did you default to the masculine? And I've got a quote here from Le Guin. Apparently, over time, she came to see what her critics were saying, and she came to regret the choices she made in her writing. Because this is a wonderful thing about Ursula Le Guin, and why she was such a special, wonderful person, is that she didn't double down and dig her heels in. She learned and she grew and she saw things and she came to regret things. She was a person who continued to grow as her life went on. And when she came to see the mistakes that she had made with the gendering of the characters on Gethin in this book, she said, I am haunted and bedeviled by the matter of the pronouns. And like, babe, aren't we all? Are we not all haunted and bedeviled by pronouns? I love this quote so much, I'm so here for it. It is one of my favourite things an author has ever said, to be bedeviled by the pronouns. It's amazing. So here I was ranting to my patrons on my Discord about my one big issue with this book being that the gender neutral is not neutral. It is masculine. Only to find, thanks to their help, that Le Guin was much, much smarter and more progressive than that. She realised her mistakes, she realised her limitations, and she grew beyond them. That's so cool. And I have so much more respect for her even than I had before. Now, I also said that the world building in The Left Hand of Darkness is phenomenal. And it really, really is, because it does go way beyond the gender. The plot is pretty simple. Genli Ai is trying to talk to the various leaders of this planet to get them to join this galactic federation. But the fact that it has various leaders is genuinely quite impressive. When you think about a lot of science fiction, whether it's in film and TV or in books or even video games, too many science fiction writers fall into the trap of imagining a world as a homogenous society. And what's ironic here is that these people are arguably very homogenous because they're all one gender, but they're also very much not. They are disparate nations with different cultures and beliefs and histories and personalities. So often in science fiction, you go to a planet and there is one race of people who all look a certain way, behave a certain way, have one language, one culture, one history, everything is shared and whole. And yet nothing could be further from the truth, especially here on Earth, the only culture and society that we actually know of. The diversity within a single town on Earth goes far beyond what we often see on a single planet in science fiction. It is absurd when you think about it. But the world building of The Left Hand of Darkness is so good that you actually get multiple cultures, multiple histories, multiple dialects, accents, ways of treating other people, traditions, etc. There are two main countries, and you go to both of them. Genli begins in one, travels to another, and ends up back at the first again at the end. You get to meet the political leaders of these nations, and that's when you learn about the idea that war is an alien thing. But these cultures, these countries, do not like each other. They do not get along, and you get to know about how they are different from each other in so many different ways. That is amazing world building. Gethen is a fascinating planet with multiple cultures. And another thing that I completely forgot about this book that I really enjoyed is how much walking there is. At the beginning, for the first few chapters, for the first few dozen pages, there is lots and lots of politics, lots and lots of chatting. Genli is talking to other people constantly. Leaders and advisors and other politicians. He's discussing things, he's talking about his culture versus their culture, blah blah blah. Lots of exposition but through dialogue, and it's all very convincing and it's pretty intense. And then you get like 20 pages of him just walking through the countryside, seeing other people, meeting people, staying at an inn, getting attacked on his way to the next place. And then the final like 50 pages of this book is a hike across mountains through the snow with a companion. It goes on forever, chapter after chapter after chapter of just wandering. There are so many different settings in this book, including a prison. It's not just an envoy in a government building talking about politics. He explores, he wanders, he sees different landscapes, he meets different kinds of people. This is a fully realized planet that Ursula Le Guin has created, with its geography and climate and different nations with different, as I've said, cultures and languages and histories and blah blah blah. And it is really well explored on foot by our protagonist. All of the intricate gender stuff that gets explored here is amazing and fascinating. And the ramifications of a genderless society, it is so enlightening, and it's so surprisingly timeless in our patriarchal society. But it's also so much bigger than that. The themes of gender roles and patriarchy are very important, and they're the things the book gets remembered for. But Le Guin is also an amazing world builder. This planet and the people you get to know on it are so well realized and fleshed out. So even putting aside the themes of gender for a second, the world that you spend time on is an enormous one, a very colourful and vibrant one, despite the fact that it's cold and covered in snow and ice. But you don't have to set the gender stuff aside because it is stitched into everything that this book is. The culture, the history, the biology of these people, everything revolves around the fact that they are a kind of monosexual society of people. It is all so well stitched together. That's what I really loved about this book. It is so well realized. Okay, we've got a planet with one gender. What does that mean? What does it not mean? There is nothing not explored here by Ursula Le Guin. It is a fully realized world with a monosexual race of people who operate in certain ways that get extrapolated into everything. All the politics, all the religion, all the beliefs, all the social etiquette as well. There's a lot about social etiquette. They have a unique word for their social etiquette, which they refer to a lot. I could go on and on and on. It is really an incredible masterpiece of science fiction for multiple reasons. The Left Hand of Darkness persists as a masterpiece of sci-fi. I am amazed by it. I'm so glad I read it again with brand new eyes. What a wonderful, wonderful, incredible novel. And I'm so grateful to my patrons for showing me how Le Guin learned and changed and grew herself over time after the publication of this book. That was really fascinating and truly helped me see this book in an even better light. So thank you so much to my amazing patrons. If you'd like to support me on Patreon, I really would welcome and appreciate your support. If you've never read The Left Hand of Darkness before, you are in for a treat. And if you have, like I had, revisit it now. And you might be as amazed and shocked, I guess, as I was. So check it out either way and subscribe for books.